I fought with my boyfriend and cheated on him an hour later with the hotel staff. He never found out. This is a story of infidelity. It all began that hot summer afternoon when the air was heavy and suffocating, both outside and within my heart. My boyfriend Jack and I had been together for 3 years and decided to spend a weekend at a charming seaside inn, hoping to rekindle the spark that seemed to be fading. Little did I know that weekend would change my life forever. We were on the balcony of our suite overlooking the sea when we started arguing. The reason? Small and insignificant, as always. He couldn't stop looking at his phone, responding to work messages, while I wanted him to be present with me. The frustration inside me grew like a storm ready to burst. "Jack, can't you just turn it off for a bit?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "We're here to enjoy ourselves together." He barely looked up from his device. "You know my work is important, Emily. I have responsibilities." "I have responsibilities too, but I'm here, trying to enjoy our time together. It seems like you don't even care." He finally raised his head, looking tired. "Of course I care. You just don't understand the pressure I'm under." That sentence was the last straw. I abruptly stood up, anger burning in my chest. "If you really cared, you'd be here with me, not with your damn phone." I stormed out of the balcony and slammed the door of our room behind me, feeling the tears of frustration starting to roll down my face. I needed to get out, to breathe, to think. I grabbed my purse and went down to the inn's reception, where I found Paul, the young staff member who had attended to us earlier. He had an easy smile and eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface. "Do you need anything, ma'am?" he asked, with genuine concern in his eyes. "No, I just need some air," I replied, trying to hold back the tears. He escorted me to the inn's bar, where he ordered 2 drinks. "Let's sit for a while. Sometimes talking helps." We sat by the pool and I started to vent. I talked about my frustration, how I felt neglected and invisible. Paul listened patiently, offering words of comfort and understanding. His presence was like a balm for my wounded soul. An hour later, we were still talking, laughing, and sharing secrets. The atmosphere between us had changed. There was a palpable tension in the air. When our eyes met, something clicked inside me. Before I could think of the consequences, I leaned in and kissed him. It was a desperate kiss, full of repressed passion and desire. Paul pulled me closer, and at that moment, everything disappeared. My anger, my guilt, my boyfriend. It was just the 2 of us, and the heat of our bodies. We took our passion to an empty room in the inn, and there, I gave myself to him completely. The sensation was of freedom, of finally being alive again. And at that moment, I didn't care about anything else. But, as with all good things, that moment of ecstasy had to end. Later, I returned to the suite I shared with Jack, carrying a secret I could never reveal. The next morning, I woke up feeling empty. The warmth of the moment with Paul had dissipated, replaced by a mix of guilt and confusion. Jack was still asleep, his face peaceful as if nothing had happened. I watched him for a moment, trying to reconcile my conflicting feelings. How could I betray someone I loved despite everything? I went down for breakfast, hoping to find Paul. I needed to clarify what had happened, to understand my own feelings. When I saw him, he was chatting animatedly with other guests, but as soon as he saw me, a sparkle in his eyes revealed that he was also thinking about the previous night. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice more hesitant than I'd like. He nodded and followed me to a more secluded corner of the restaurant. "About last night," I began, but he interrupted me. "It was magical, Emily. I know you're confused, but don't blame yourself. Sometimes life surprises us with unexpected moments." I shook my head, trying to process his words. "But now what? What do we do?" He held my hand, his expression serious. "We don't have to decide anything now. Let things happen. If it's meant to be, it will be." I returned to the table where Jack was already sitting, eating silently. The tension between us was palpable, but he seemed oblivious to my turbulent thoughts. We tried to talk about trivial things, but it soon became clear that we were still hurt from the argument the night before. We decided to go to the beach, hoping to ease the tension. The sea was calm, and the sound of the waves was almost therapeutic. We walked side by side, not saying much, each lost in our own thoughts. "Emily, he started after a while. "I'm sorry about last night. I know I've been distant, and that's not fair to you." I sighed, feeling a pang of guilt. "I'm sorry too. I know your work is important, but sometimes I feel alone." He stopped and pulled me into a hug. "Let's try to make this work. I want us to be happy together." I hugged him back, but inside, my emotions were a mess. I still felt the electricity of Paul's touch, and the guilt was eating me up. I decided I needed time to think, to understand what I really wanted. That night, we returned to the inn and had dinner in silence. Jack seemed more relaxed, and we tried to watch a movie together, but my mind was elsewhere. After he fell asleep, I went out to the balcony where Paul was waiting. "We need to talk," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. He nodded and pulled me into a hug. "I know you're confused, Emily, but I'll be here waiting for you. Take all the time you need." That night, as I watched the sea under the moonlight, I realized I was at a breaking point. My life was about to change drastically, and I needed to decide what I really wanted. One night, after yet another encounter with Paul, I returned to the suite and found Jack awake, waiting for me. There was a worried look on his face that made me freeze inside. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, his voice tense. I sat next to him, trying to control my breathing. "What is it?" "I've felt you being distant," he began, choosing his words carefully. "I know we've had problems, but I feel like there's something more. Something you're not telling me." My heart raced, but I tried to stay calm. "It's nothing, Jack. I'm just a bit tired, I guess." He held my hand, his eyes searching mine. "Please be honest with me." The guilt was overwhelming, but I couldn't tell the truth. "I'm just stressed. This weekend hasn't been what I expected." He sighed, letting go of my hand. "I feel the same way. Maybe we need some time to ourselves to think." Those words hit me like a blow. "Are you saying you want to break up?" "I don't know," he replied, the pain evident in his voice. "I just feel like something is wrong, and I don't know how to fix it." That night, while Jack slept beside me, my thoughts churned like a stormy sea. The possibility of losing Jack, someone who had been my companion for so long, was terrifying. But at the same time, the idea of giving up Paul, of renouncing the passion and freedom he represented, seemed unbearable. The next day, I decided I needed some time alone to think. I told Jack I was going for a walk on the beach to clear my mind, and he agreed, though with a worried expression. As I walked, the salty sea breeze helped organize my thoughts. I needed to understand what I really wanted. Jack was stable, reliable, someone I could count on. But the security he offered came with a sense of stagnation, of a life predictable and without surprises. Paul, on the other hand, was an explosion of emotions, a constant adventure. But building a life based on an adventure was a risky gamble. As I walked, I saw Paul in the distance. He was sitting on a rock, looking out at the sea, and my heart raced. I approached slowly, not knowing exactly what to say. "Hi," he said when he saw me. "Looks like you have a lot on your mind." I sat next to him, and for a moment, we were silent, just listening to the sound of the waves. Finally, I gathered the courage to speak. "Paul, I don't know what to do. I feel torn between two lives." He looked at me, his eyes full of understanding. "I can't decide for you, Emily. Only you can know what you really want." His words were true, but they didn't make the decision any easier. We spent the rest of the morning together, talking about everything and nothing. And for a moment, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. But I knew that peace was temporary, an illusion that would soon dissipate. I returned to the inn with a decision. I needed to talk to Jack, to be honest about my feelings. I knew I couldn't tell the truth about Paul, but at least I needed to be sincere about the confusion inside me. I found Jack on the balcony of our suite, looking out at the sea. I sat next to him, and for a moment, we just sat in silence, absorbing each other's presence. "Jack, we need to talk," I began, my voice trembling a little. He looked at me, and I saw the pain in his eyes. "I know, Emily. I've been thinking a lot too." I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. I feel lost. I know you've been trying, and I appreciate that, but I feel disconnected, like something is missing. He was silent for a moment, processing my words. I feel that too, and it hurts because I really love you. Tears started to roll down my face. I love you too, Jack, but I don't know if that's enough. He pulled me into a hug, and for a moment we just held each other, trying to find a way through the pain and confusion. I knew the decision wouldn't be easy, but at least I was taking the first step towards the truth. After our conversation, we decided it would be best to spend some time apart. It was a painful but necessary decision. We returned home with a tacit agreement that each of us needed space to reflect on what we really wanted. The days that followed were a blur of conflicting emotions. I tried to focus on work, but my mind was constantly divided between Jack and Paul. Paul and I continued to see each other, but something had changed. The initial euphoria had given way to a more complex reality. I began to realize that despite all the passion, our relationship also had its limitations. He was young and carefree, while I carried the weight of my choices and the consequences they could have. One night, while we were together, Paul brought up the question I had been dreading. "Emily, what's going to happen with us?" he asked, his voice full of uncertainty. I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. "I don't know, Paul. This is all so complicated." He held my hand, his eyes fixed on mine. "I know it's hard, but I need to know if there's a future for us." The honesty in his eyes was disarming. "Paul, I really like you, but there are a lot of things at stake. I don't know if we're ready to face all this." He was silent for a moment, and then to my surprise, he smiled sadly. "Emily, I want you to be happy, regardless of where that happiness is. If it's with me, great. If it's with Jack, I'll understand." His words touched me deeply. "Thank you, Paul. That means a lot to me." The days continued to pass, and I began to question my choices more and more. I decided it was time to talk to Jack again. I needed to know where he was emotionally and if there was a chance to save our relationship. I arranged to meet at a cafe we used to frequent. When he arrived, he looked tired, but there was a determination in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. "Hi, Emily," he said, sitting down across from me. "Hi, Jack. Thanks for coming." He nodded, and for a moment, we just sat in silence, observing each other. Finally, he broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot these past few days," he began, his voice calm. "And I realize that despite everything, I still want to try to make this work." I felt a mix of relief and fear. "I do too, Jack, but we need to be honest with each other," he agreed. "Yes, we do. I know there are things that haven't been said, and that needs to change." I embraced the sincerity of his words. "I agree. And I want to start by saying that I really care about you, but I also need to understand my own feelings." He held my hand, a gesture that brought me comfort. "Let's take it one step at a time. If there's still love here, we can find a way to overcome this." We left the cafe with a new understanding, a promise to try to rebuild what we had lost. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to fight for what was still worth it. The following days were challenging. Jack and I started attending couples therapy sessions in an attempt to resolve our communication issues and better understand our needs and desires. The sessions were intense and often painful. We had to confront our fears, insecurities, and the hurts we had accumulated over the years. At the same time, Paul remained present in my life, but in a more subtle way. We decided it would be best to take a break, allowing me to focus entirely on resolving the issues with Jack. He understood and respected my decision, which only reinforced my admiration for him. Therapy brought to light many repressed feelings. I realized that for a long time, I had put my own needs second, to try to keep the peace in the relationship. Jack also realized that his neglectful behavior had contributed to my dissatisfaction. Slowly, we began to rebuild our trust and reconnect on a deeper level. One night, after a particularly intense session, Jack suggested we take a trip together to a place where we could reconnect away from the pressures of everyday life. I agreed, seeing this as an opportunity to start anew. We chose a small town in the mountains, a quiet and isolated place. The trip was full of moments of reflection and rediscovery. We walked along the trails, talked about our dreams and fears, and began to rediscover what had brought us together in the first place. One afternoon, while we were sitting by a lake, Jack took my hand and looked deeply into my eyes. "Emily, I really want this to work. I know I'm not perfect, but I'm willing to change, to be the partner you deserve." His sincere commitment touched my heart. "Jack, I want this too. I know I've made mistakes, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix things." We returned from that trip with a new perspective, determined to rebuild our relationship. There were still many issues to resolve, but we were committed to working together to overcome them. Paul, meanwhile, remained a present but distant figure. I missed the intensity and passion, but I knew I needed to focus on Jack. Even so, I couldn't help but think of him from time to time, wondering if our paths would cross again in a different way. A few months later, Jack and I were in a much better place. Our communication had improved, and we started making plans for the future. I felt we were building a more solid foundation, based on honesty and understanding. But, as always, life had its own surprises. One night, while we were having dinner, I received a message from Paul. He was in town and wanted to see me. My heart raced, and a wave of emotions overwhelmed me. Jack noticed my reaction and asked what had happened. I decided to be honest. "It's Paul," I said, trying to control my voice. "He's in town and wants to see me." Jack's expression hardened for a moment, but then he took a deep breath. "Do you want to meet him?" I thought for a moment. "I think so. We need to resolve some things, to put a proper end to it." He nodded, though visibly uncomfortable. "All right, just be honest with me, whatever your decision." That night, I met Paul, my heart pounding. Seeing him again brought back all the emotions I had tried to suppress. We talked at length, and he confessed that he still had feelings for me, but he also understood the complicated situation we were in. "Emily, I want you to be happy, even if it's not with me," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. Those words were both a relief and a pain. I knew I needed to make a definitive choice. I said goodbye to Paul, knowing that it would be a farewell, at least for now. I returned home where Jack was waiting anxiously. I told him everything, and for the first time in a long time, I felt we were truly connected. Jack hugged me, and I realized that despite all the difficulties, there was still love between us. A love worth fighting for and growing. In the following months, Jack and I continued to work on our relationship. Honesty became the cornerstone of our communication, and we began to rediscover the joy of being together. We made more trips, spent more quality time, and gradually rebuilt the trust that had been shaken. One day, while we were tidying up the room, I found an old box of letters and photos of us. We sat together to revisit those memories, laughing at the funny photos and getting emotional with the letters full of promises of eternal love. The nostalgia brought us a sense of renewal, and I realized that despite everything, our love had withstood many storms. But life, as always, had more surprises in store. One morning, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Paul again. He was moving to a distant city and wanted to see me one last time before leaving. My heart tightened at the sound of his voice. I knew I needed to be honest with Jack about this meeting. "Jack," Paul called, I began, trying to stay calm. "He's moving and wants to see me one last time." Jack was silent for a moment, absorbing the news. "Do you think it's a good idea?" he asked, his voice cautious. I thought for a moment. "I think so. I want to say a proper goodbye. I think it's necessary to truly move on." He nodded, though reluctantly. "All right, I trust you." I met Paul at a cafe, and as soon as I saw him, a wave of emotions washed over me. He looked different, more mature, and there was a melancholy in his eyes that moved me. "Emily, thank you for coming," he said, his voice gentle. "I couldn't leave without saying goodbye," I replied, trying to hide the sadness in my voice. We talked at length, reminiscing about our moments together and sharing our plans for the future. Paul told me about the new city, his new job, and how he was excited for a fresh start. "I'll always remember you, Emily. You taught me so much about love and passion," he said, holding my hand. I felt a tear roll down my face. "I'll never forget you either, Paul. You brought something to my life that I didn't know I needed." We said our goodbyes with a long and silent hug, both aware that this was a definitive farewell. I returned home with a heavy heart, but also a sense of closure. I felt that I could finally move on. Jack was waiting for me when I got home, and I ran into his arms, feeling immense relief. "How did it go?" he asked, concerned. "It was hard but necessary," I replied, hugging him tightly. "I feel like I can finally leave it behind." In the months that followed, our relationship flourished. The trust we rebuilt grew stronger, and we began to make more concrete plans for the future. We decided to move to a new city, away from the memories and ghosts of the past, to start anew. The move was a rebirth for us. We found a new home, made new friends, and gradually built a new life together. There were still challenges, of course, but now we faced everything as a team, with honesty and love. A year after our move, Jack proposed to me. It was a moment full of emotion and meaning. I said yes, knowing that despite all the ups and downs, our love had become stronger than ever. On our wedding day, as I walked down the aisle, I saw Paul among the guests. He gave me a supportive smile and a nod, and at that moment, I knew everything had happened exactly as it should. Jack and I exchanged vows, promising love and fidelity, and I began a new chapter of my life, without regrets and with a heart at peace. Married life with Jack was full of new experiences and challenges. The move to a new city brought the opportunity to start fresh in every way. Jack and I dedicated ourselves to getting to know our new home, exploring every corner and discovering special places that became our favorites. One of our first adventures was adopting a dog. We had always wanted a pet, and it felt like the right time. We chose a Labrador puppy named Max, who quickly became an integral part of our family. Max brought indescribable joy to our lives, and caring for him helped strengthen our partnership even more. Jack was thriving in his new job, and I also found an opportunity that challenged and inspired me. We started making plans for the future, including the possibility of having children. We talked about how we wanted to raise our kids, the values we wanted to instill, and we dreamed about the life we would build together. On weekends, we loved hiking in the nearby mountains. The outdoor walks provided time for us to talk, reflect, and appreciate the beauty around us. During these hikes, we often talked about the past, but always with a perspective of learning and growth. One afternoon, during one of these hikes, we stopped to rest at a lookout point with a stunning view. Jack pulled me close, and looking into my eyes said, "Emily, I'm so glad we chose to move forward together. Every day with you makes me realize how strong we are." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Jack, I feel the same way. We've been through so much, but every challenge has made us stronger." In the following months, we began planning a trip to celebrate our first wedding anniversary. We chose a tropical destination, a paradise where we could relax and enjoy each other's company. The trip was magical, full of unforgettable moments that further strengthened our bond. Back in our routine, life continued to surprise us with small joys and challenges. I learned to appreciate every moment, every day with Jack, knowing that our journey together was a constant process of building and rebuilding. When we returned from our anniversary trip, life seemed to be in perfect harmony. Jack and I were more connected than ever, and Max's presence in our lives brought constant joy. However, life, with its unpredictable nature, had more surprises in store for us. One day while I was at work, I received a call that changed everything. It was from the local hospital informing me that Jack had been in a car accident and was in critical condition. My world stopped. I felt a wave of panic and despair as I rushed to the hospital, my heart pounding uncontrollably. When I arrived, I was taken to the waiting room, where I met a doctor who explained the situation. Jack was in surgery, and the next few moments would be crucial. I sat in a chair, unable to hold back the tears streaming down my face. The wait was agonizing, each minute dragging on like an eternity. Finally, the doctor returned with news. The surgery had been successful, but Jack was still in critical condition and would need time to recover. I entered the room where he was, and seeing him there, vulnerable, made my heart ache. I took his hand and whispered words of love and encouragement, promising to be by his side every step of the way. The days that followed were challenging. I spent every possible moment by Jack's side, helping him recover while also trying to maintain my own sanity. The situation forced us to face another test of our resilience as a couple. Jack, with his unwavering determination, began to show signs of improvement. Every small progress was a victory we celebrated together. Our conversations during this period were deep and introspective, further strengthening our bond. I realized that despite all the difficulties, our love had an unbreakable strength. One day, while we were sitting in the hospital room, Jack held my hand and looked deeply into my eyes. "Emily, I don't know what I would have done without you by my side. You are my rock, my strength." Tears welled up in my eyes again, but this time, from gratitude and love. "Jack, you are my strength too. Together, we can overcome anything." In time, Jack made a full recovery. We returned home with a newfound appreciation for life and the time we had together. We decided it was time to move forward with our plans to have children, feeling ready for this new chapter. The news of the pregnancy brought indescribable joy. Jack was radiant, and we spent the following months planning every detail for the arrival of our baby. Max also seemed to understand that something special was happening, always staying close to me as if protecting me. Finally, the day arrived. The labor was long and exhausting, but when I heard our baby's first cry, all the difficulties melted away. I held our baby in my arms, feeling a wave of unconditional love I had never experienced before. Jack was by my side, his eyes filled with tears of joy. "He's perfect, Emily, our little miracle." Life, with all its twists and turns, had brought us to that moment. I felt complete, surrounded by Jack's love and the new life we had created together. I knew that no matter what the future held, we were ready to face it together. The first few months with our baby were a whirlwind of emotions. Sleepless nights, endless diapers, and moments of pure despair were balanced by smiles, first words, and the unparalleled joy of watching our child grow. Jack and I took turns with the tasks, supporting each other every step of this new journey. Our home was filled with life. Max, our faithful Labrador, proved to be a true protector of the baby, always vigilant and gentle. Laughter echoed through the walls, and the happiness we shared was palpable. Each day was a new adventure, a new challenge that we faced together as a family. One day, while organizing some things in the attic, I found a box I hadn't seen in a long time. Inside were old photos and letters from when Jack and I first started dating. We sat on the floor, flipping through those memories, laughing at the clothes and hairstyles of the time, and getting emotional with the letters full of promises and dreams. "Look at this," Jack said, holding a photo of us on a beach trip, both of us smiling carefree. "So much has changed since then," I smiled, feeling a wave of nostalgia. "Yes, it has, but I think we've become stronger because of everything we've been through." He pulled me into a hug, and we sat there, wrapped in memories and gratitude for the path we had walked together. Our journey hadn't been easy, but each obstacle had made us stronger and brought us closer. As our child grew, we began to think more about the future. We talked about the values we wanted to instill, the dreams we had for him and for ourselves. Jack and I were more united than ever, and our communication, based on honesty and love, was the solid foundation on which we built our lives. One day I received an unexpected message. It was from Paul, my former lover. He was in town for work and wanted to know if we could meet. A wave of emotions washed over me as I read the message, but I knew I needed to talk to Jack about it. "Jack, Paul is in town and wants to see me," I said, while we were preparing dinner. He was silent for a moment, processing the information. "Do you think it's a good idea?" I thought before answering. "I think so. I think it would be good to close that chapter for good." Jack nodded, though with a cautious expression. "All right, I trust you." I met Paul at a cafe, the same place where we had said goodbye the last time. He looked well, more mature, and had a calm air about him. We talked about our lives, our families, and our journeys since we last saw each other. "Emily, it's good to see you happy," he said with a sincere smile. "Thank you, Paul. You seem to be doing well too." He nodded, looking at the coffee cup in his hands. "Yes, I am. But I'll always remember what we had. It was an important time for me." I felt a mix of emotions, but also a sense of closure. It was for me too, and I'm grateful for everything I learned. We said goodbye with a hug, and I felt that I could finally leave that chapter behind, with no regrets, but with gratitude for what was and what had become. I returned home where Jack and our child were waiting for me. I hugged them tightly, feeling a deep peace. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, built with love, resilience, and the certainty that together we could overcome anything. I felt that I had finally found my place, a place where love, honesty, and trust were the foundation of everything. And I knew that, no matter what the future held, we were ready to face it together.